All right, let's create an explosion object now. I also went back in the color object or in the particle object and added a second constructor that you should add. So one that takes in a color parameter and sets the field called C to the parameter called C that was passed over. And remember, these things are color coded. So this is our field, and we're assigning it a value of the local variable C that was a parameter passed over. And that's mainly so we can use it in the explosion class. All right, let's talk about what an explosion is. It's a collection of particles that kind of blow out from a centralized point, and the particle already knows how to do that. So particle is randomly assigned a dx and dy, so it's already going to kind of explode away from this point, and it updates itself in the update method. It updates its position. So really all an explosion object is going to be is a collection of particles, and then it's going to cycle over each particle and update each of those particles. So it needs to remember a couple things. So it has a field for a list of particle objects called, I think I called this pieces, and we'll have to import a list from Java utilities from java.util. And then it has, I like explosions to sort of fade out as they go out. It gives them kind of a smooth look. So I'm gonna show you how to do transparency. So we're gonna use a private float because these transparency numbers have to be in the form of a float, which is just another kind of variable like a double or an int. A float is a large double. A long, if you want to know, the name long refers to a long integer or a big integer. But a float is just a big, like more precise, larger double. Okay, and we're going to call that alpha, which is a term that's usually used for transparencies. And then we're going to have a private Boolean called isActive. Actually, we don't need to do that, so we're going to take that out. And then a private double, whoops, jeez, I had my fingers in the wrong place. A private double called fade speed. And then we're going to have a public, the constructor, public explosion. And it's going to take in an int x and int y, a color C, and an int called num pieces. So an explosion can be just a few pieces or a bunch of pieces. We also want to have, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. We need to say that explosion implements game entity, and it'll have all of those methods in just a second. So we need to import the interface game entity. And if we remember, game entity has these for methods, so we need to make sure that we implement all four of those. We're not going to use two of them. We're not going to use modifier and getRectangle, but we'll just leave them just kind of method shells. So then we need to import the color object, and we need to say alpha. We're going to start at full transparency, so full opacity. I mean, so you have to say 1f, and I'm not quite exactly sure why it needs to have the f after it. This is for float. It's just to format the data correctly. I don't get why this has to be there in the case of a float, but it does. And then we're going to say fade speed equals, I don't know, I'm going to guess at this, 0.05? Sure. I don't actually know what that's going to look like. Basically what's going to happen is we're going to decrement 1 by this amount each time through the loop, and 1 as it gets closer to 0. 0 is complete transparency, so see-throughness, and 1 is total opacity, and so it'll be decremented towards transparency as the loop continues. I'll show you that as we go. And then we're going to initialize the array list of pieces, so pieces equals new array list of particle objects, and we're going to have to import array list. Then we are going to add the correct number of pieces to our list, and we're going to use num pieces to do that, which is going to allow outside classes to add a particular number of pieces to an explosion. So we're going to write a loop for int I equals 0. I is less than num pieces. I++. And then we want to just say pieces.add. This is how you add something to an array list, right? We're going to add a new particle, and we're going to pass over x, y, and let's remember what our constructor requests of us. It requests, our second constructor requests a double x, and it'll just take in an int2. Y and a color, so that's what we're going to give it. We're going to pass over x, y, and c, right, the color object, semicolon. So this will create the correct number of explosions. Now we have a couple unimplemented methods that we are going to implement. We have 4, in fact. We have public void update, public void draw, graphics 2D.
Larissa Bauman, please go to Mr. Boren's office. Larissa Bauman, please go to Mr. Boren's office. Thank you.
Apologize about that. We have 2 other ones we're not actually going to use, but we're required by the interface to implement them. Public rectangle get rect, and public void modify, and it takes in a modifier m, and we're going to have to import these things even though we're not going to use them. So we'll import modifier from bricks, we'll import rectangle from Java Auth, and we'll import graphics 2D. Oh yeah, I always do this right now, changing it to like the incorrect, and then we have to say return new rectangle 0, 0, 0, 0. Just return it's just to require to satisfy the requirement of the method that it return a rectangle object. Okay, so this is otherwise just placeholder methods down here because they're required by the interface. Placeholder. Under update, we need to decrement alpha. So alpha minus equals fade speed each time through the loop, and we need to say and we also, I'm sorry, I forgot, we have to have another method called public int get alpha, and all we have to do is return alpha, or we can say this should be a float because alpha is of type float. And then here in the update method, we just want to update all the particles. So we can say for particle p, and then I would like you to go over pieces p.update. And that will update all the pieces. And we'll do something very similar in draw. In draw, we're just going to draw all the pieces. So for particle p pieces p.draw graphics 2D G2. Alright, but we haven't done anything with the alpha yet, and so I'm going to show you how to make use of the alpha. And so we do that with this object called an alpha composite. So we're going to create an alpha composite object, and import it from Java Auth, and we're going to say alcom, we're just going to call it alcom, equals alpha composite dot get instance alpha, this is kind of a long one so I have to read it, alpha composite dot src over, and then we're going to send in the float alpha. So I'm not 100% sure what each of these values is doing. So I learned how with, this is a little bit like sound, I just kind of learned how to do it, but I didn't exactly learn what this get instance means precisely. And then we're going to have to say g2.set composite. So we're setting alcom. we're setting an attribute of our G2 robot tool. We're saying draw at this transparency. And then we are going to just kind of copy and paste those lines down below. And instead of creating this tool with alpha, we're going to say at the end we want to set it back to full opacity so that other classes can draw with G2. It's set back to its normal rule. And I think that this is a completed explosion class at this point. So at this point, I'm going to stop the video, and in the next video, I'll show you how to actually implement an explosion.